How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to an episode here on Let's Play Twitter. As always, I'm Ethan Encoder, your favorite underqualified senior software engineer. As always, if you guys want access to a private repository, there's a link in the description down below that'll walk you through exactly how to do that. Now, with that being said, let's go and hop into what we're working on today. Today, we're going to go ahead and continue and try to wrap up all of this extra messaging functionality here on the back end, such as getting it so we can create replies, we can go ahead and hide messages, as well as read messages that we can go ahead and hop on the front end the next few episodes and get all that stuff working as well. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and hop into our message service. We're first going to go ahead and start out getting reply. Reply is actually going to be somewhat simple in this episode because it's going to go ahead and call the create message and then do a little couple extra steps. So let's go ahead and hop into it. So like I said, we're going to go down here below our create message function. So here we'll go ahead and just say public message, and we'll go ahead and say create reply. This is going to take in a string message payload. So message payload will take in a list, a multi-part, and then file. So this is going to be very similar to the other one, called files, and then we'll have a string reply to. So this is the one that we're replying to. So we're just going to call our create message with message payload and files, and then go ahead and set the reply to. So we're going to go ahead and say integer reply to ID is equal to integer dot parse int, and go ahead and pass in that reply to because it's going to come in as a string, so we want to be safe here. We're going to say message reply to message is equal to message repository dot, and then find by ID, and then we'll go ahead and say reply to ID, and then here or else throw. We're going to set up a custom exception in a second, so we'll deal with that. And then finally, message is equal to this dot create, and I'm actually saying message is equal to this dot create message. I'm going to go ahead and pass it message payload. We'll also go ahead and pass it files. After we create the message, we'll say message.set reply to, and we'll go ahead and set that message reply to message like so. We'll go ahead and say message.set and then message type. Go ahead and say message type dot reply. And we also, I forgot to do this part, we also want to go ahead and, this will probably break everything in this episode as well. We want to go ahead and say message, and I'm going to actually do it like this. Let's say return, message repository dot save, and let's go ahead and update this again. I don't know if it's going to work because technically, well, it should work actually because we have at transactional, and this should be a transaction, so it should be okay. We'll see what happens here. Go ahead and save the message again and do it like that. So it looks good. Let's go ahead, that imported, that's fine. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new exception for if we don't find it. So let's go ahead and say space JC. We'll go ahead and put this in the exceptions. And then this will be a message does not exist exception. And let's go ahead and create that. Let's go ahead and say this extends runtime exception. So extends run, like a type runtime exception. And we'll just do two simple instructions here. Public message does not exist exception. And we'll just go ahead and say super. And then message does not exist. We'll also go ahead and say, public message does not exist exception. This will take in a string, string message. Go ahead and say super and then message. So that's good to go. Let's go back in to the message service and throw that in. So back here in the message service, instead of saying or else throw nothing, we'll go ahead and say or else throw message does not exist exception, : new, and that is good to go. So now we just need to go ahead and hop into our message controller and set this up, as well as handle this exception. So let's go into the message controller. Now inside of our message controller, I'm just going to go ahead and go here above React. We'll say at post mapping like so, and this is going to be very similar. So value is equal to reply. We're going to go ahead and say consumes equal to, and this will be media type dot application underscore JSON underscore value. We're also going to go ahead and have media, if I could type media type dot, and then multi-part form, not form data, but form data value. Like so, okay. And we'll go ahead and say public message GTO. Still going to pass back a message GTO. We set that up last episode to be fixed. Send reply. We'll have at request part. And here we'll have message payload. Whoops, message payload. This will be string message payload. We're going to go ahead and have at request part. And this is going to be called image. And this will be list of multi. I don't know why it's not saying it right, but whatever, multi-part file. And then this will be image, and then at request part. And then this one will be reply to, I believe. Let me just double check that's what I called it. Yes, it is. And then we'll go ahead and say string reply to. And I feel like I named something wrong here. Let's see, public send reply. I don't know if it's because we're not returning anything. So let's go ahead and try to return and then see if it goes away here. Go ahead and say message is equal to message service dot create reply. And then here we'll go ahead and have this. And then instead of files, we'll go ahead and say image like so. And that's good. And then we'll go ahead and return a new message GTO. And then we made that new message GTO constructor. So we just go ahead and pass message in there and that should be good. Cool. So it's just complaining because we weren't returning anything. It looked like it was being a little bit broken, but it's fine. So next we'll go ahead and add in the new exception handler. So it's the exception, except I can't type, handler. And this will be message does not exist exception dot class. And here it's going to return. And I didn't do this properly. Let me actually make the class like I'm supposed to. So public, and then this will be response entity of type string. Just go ahead and say handle. Whoops. Message does not exist exception. And then here we'll go ahead and just return, and then response entity, and then dot status. And then here we'll go ahead and say 404 because it's not found. Dot body, we'll go ahead and say message, whoops, does not exist. So now we have that, we can save that. Let's make sure that our application restarted. So it started, but I'm going to go ahead and give it one more refresh here, and I'll see you guys in Postman. Our application restarted. Let's go ahead and create a conversation between me and Rick. As always, I'm going to go ahead and make a message as Rick. So here, I'm going to go ahead and make this slightly smaller. So we can see that we have message is sent by user 1, which is Rick, and this says message from Rick. So we go ahead and send this. We have a message from Rick. So now if we go ahead and go into reply here, so it's basically the same, except we have reply to. This is a message ID 1, and then inside of our message, we have the same exact thing. And here, what we're going to go ahead and have is we have message type of reply. We also go ahead and reset this, so this might not be needed. It is what it is. Sent by is going to be me. Conversations 1, we have me and Rick, and then it says replying to Rick's message. Now, last episode, I had forgotten to save something to the repository, and it broke everything. So let's see if this breaks everything. It's going to make my life way harder, or if it's just going to work. There we go. Cool. Looks good. So now we have message ID 3. It's reply, and then we can see we have the reply to here and all the text and everything. So literally it just makes a brand new message. It says it's a reply, and then since we know it's a reply message type, we know we're going to have a reply to, and we can kind of use this logic on the front end later on. So let's go and just check in the database, make sure we have the reply and everything's good before moving on to being able to go ahead and hide a message for a user, and also go ahead and be able to read a message. So now in dbeaver, let's go ahead and just refresh our messages. So let's say message, go ahead and give this a refresh. Go and open up the data. We should have 2 messages. So you can see message ID 1 is from Rick, and it doesn't have a reply to message. Again, I don't know why it's doing 1, 3, whatever. I still haven't looked into that. I should probably stop being lazy and look into it. But you can see we have replying to Rick's message when it was sent at, and it is a type 2, which means that it's a reply. We have a conversation ID, and we also have the message reply to. So everything is looking good here. So let's hop back into our code and get it so we can hide messages and move forward from there. So once again, let's hop back into our message service. Inside our message service, I'm just going to go ahead and go below our React. We're going to go ahead and say public, and this is going to return a message, hide message for user. Let's go take in an application user, an integer message ID. At this point, I probably should just fetch the user by ID, but it is what it is. We'll see if it works. Message is equal to message repository, and then dot find by ID, and we'll go ahead and pass in that message ID, and then dot or else throw. And we'll go ahead and throw a message does not exist exception : new. So we'll go ahead and try to find that message. We'll say set application user, and here we'll go ahead and call this hidden users is equal to message.get and then hidden by. So go ahead and get all the people that are currently hidden. Now, I don't think there's any way to quote unquote like unhide a message. So it's going to go if there's a person that will just, it's a set, we'll ignore it basically. So hidden users.add, go ahead and add that user. If later on down the road we find out this doesn't quite work like this, we can always change it. Then message.set hidden by, go ahead and be those hidden users. Go ahead and update that, and then go ahead and return our message repository, and then dot save, and go ahead and update that message. So this one, very simple. We're just going to go ahead and fetch those hidden users out of that message that we have, add in the user that we passed in, and then go ahead and return that message after it gets saved. Let's go back into the message controller and set this up. So inside our message controller, I'm just going to go ahead and go below our React once again. Go ahead and say at post mapping, and this value will equal to /hide, and then this can be a public message once again. Maybe these should have been message DTOs. Now that I think about it, we'll see what happens on the front end here. I might come back in the next episode, change to the message DTOs. We'll see. Go ahead and say hide, and then message for user. I'm gonna go ahead and take an at request body. We're going to create a new class for this. This is going to be hide message request DTO. Go ahead and call that body, and we'll set this up in a second. We'll go ahead and just return message service dot, and then hide message for user. It's going to take in body.get user. We'll go ahead and say body.get and then message ID. Again, these don't exist yet, so we're going to go ahead and create that. Let's go ahead and say space JC. This will go into our DTO, and then let's go ahead and say hide message request DTO. Go ahead and create that. So this one is going to be very simple. It's going to have a private application user. We'll go ahead and say user, and it's also a private, and then integer message ID. Go ahead and say space CA to go ahead and let's first import this, and then we'll go ahead and generate our constructors. So we'll do a no arg. We'll do an all arg constructor. Why not? We'll go ahead and do getters and setters, and we'll go ahead and just do a toString 1, 2. So that should be good to go. Let me go ahead and just make this look a little bit prettier so it's not so ugly. Now when we save this, we're going to get an error. That's fine. Okay, let's hop back into our message controller and bring that back in. And outside of our message controller, it looks like it might have actually imported it for us. So that is cool. So now, in theory, we should be able to actually go ahead and test this out as well. We're going to have to recreate our conversation and everything, but let me go ahead and make sure that the application once again got reset, and I'll meet you guys in Postman. So let's go ahead and create our conversation again, and then let's go ahead and just make a message from Rick that we'll go ahead and hide. So I might need this message, I don't remember. And then let's go into our /post hide. I'm going to cheat a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and just say user ID 5. It should fetch the user fine, and then user or message ID is 1. So let's go ahead and just make sure this works. You can see that we have all of this, and we can see hidden by is set up and it has me inside of it. If I send this again, basically nothing will happen because it's set, so it won't be added twice or anything. Let's just go ahead and check dbeaver and make sure this actually got updated properly inside of our database. So let's go ahead and refresh our messages. This should go ahead and just show only one message once again. That's fine. And then if we go ahead and go into our message hidden by, you should go ahead and see user ID 1 is hidden message ID 5. So again, whenever we pull this data back to our front end, we'll go ahead and check to see, hey, has this user hidden this message / deleted it for themselves? And then we just won't show it basically in the render. So this one episode seems like it's gonna be a pretty quick one, which is good. After the last one, had me struggling for so long. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop back into the code. We have a few things we need to set up before we can actually read messages. But we'll go ahead and set up the function to read the messages. So let's hop back into our code and get to work here. Back in our backend, let's go ahead and hop into our conversation service and set up a function to be able to fetch a conversation by an ID. Let's just go ahead and put it at the top just because that's where I like to put these like more general ones. So public conversation find by ID. Go ahead and pass in an integer ID, and we'll go ahead and say return, and then conversation like a type repository find by ID, pass in the ID, and we'll go ahead and say dot or else throw. So here, once again, we're going to create a custom exception to deal with this. So let's go ahead and say space JC. We'll go ahead and put this in my exceptions package, and this is going to be conversation does not exist exception. Let's go ahead and create that. Once again, let's go ahead and say extends runtime exception. So extends runtime exception. That's good to go. We'll go ahead and say public, whoopsie daisies, public, and then conversation does not exist exception. We'll go ahead and say super and pass in the message conversation does not exist. And then we'll also go ahead and say public and conversation does not exist exception. And we'll go ahead and pass in a string message, and then we'll call super with the message. Whoops. Go ahead and fix that. So now let's hop back into our conversation service and fix that up. So once again, our conversation service, let's go ahead and say conversation does not exist exception, new, to go ahead and throw that new exception. And now we need to go ahead and start working on some stuff for notifications, because whenever you read a message, you also need to go ahead and clear out the notification, obviously. So let's go ahead and go into the notification repository to start out here. So inside the notification repository, we're going to go ahead and set up a new function here, a method here to fetch some stuff by the user and message. So we're going to go ahead and say list notification. And we're going to say find by message in. So we want to go ahead and find each notification by a specific message, basically. Pass it a list of message. We'll go ahead and call it messages. So basically what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to find specific messages that we're reading, and we're going to go ahead and find the corresponding notifications for each of those messages. We're going to whittle it down a little bit so that we only read the notification for a specific user that's reading them, and so on and so forth. So now we need to do that next part is actually use these notifications that we get from this find by message in and go ahead and acknowledge those notifications. So to do that, let's go into our notification service. So here, let's just go ahead and go to the bottom. That one's probably a good place for this one. So here underneath our acknowledge notifications, which we maybe could have used, but it is what it is. We're going to go ahead and say public, and actually we do use it. So I just got ahead of myself. Void and then read message notifications. We probably could have done this slightly different. We didn't need to make the read message notifications, but it's fine. Say list of message and then messages, and then this also needs to take an application user, which is going to be the recipient, so the person that actually received the notifications in the first place. We're going to say list notification, is going to be equal to notifications equal to notification repository, can't type, dot, and then find by message in, and then pass in messages. So this should go ahead and get us the notifications for this specific messages. But the thing is, each message could possibly have more than one notification sent to it, because if you think about a group message, if a group message has 3 people in it, each message might have 2 people. So we need to whittle this down a little bit more. We're going to say list notification, and this is going to be filtered notifications. I tried doing this with a query, it didn't quite work like the way I wanted it to. So I'm just going to go ahead and say notification s.stream. This way worked quite a bit easier. We're going to go ahead and say dot filter. And here we're going to go ahead and say nodi, because I'm lazy, and nodi dot get recipient dot get user ID is equal to recipient dot get user ID. So if the IDs are the same, we want to go ahead and fetch them or return them and then go ahead and say toList. So we're going to go ahead and get the specific notifications for each message inside this list for the specific recipient. We might also want to like check to see if it's read or not, but I'm going to probably do some logic to only send back the messages that need to be read. It should probably be fine. So I'll go ahead and say this dot acknowledge notifications, and then pass in those filtered notifications because we only want to read ours. We don't want to read someone else's in the group chats, and that is good to go. And then we can go ahead and deal with the message side of things, which whenever we actually read a message, we need to add that into the read by or seen by. That way it can be shown on the front end whenever we're like in the group conversation, or I think maybe in the front end as well, it'll show like the check marks or something whenever it's been seen. I don't know, I need to double check that. But enough yapping, let's hop back into our message service and get this set up. So back in our message service, we actually need to go to the top here and add in a couple more things. So we already have our user service. We also need to go ahead and add in a private conversation service. I'll go ahead and say conversation service. And we can also go ahead and bring this up like so. Let's go ahead and bring in the conversation service. I already have the user service. We'll go ahead and say conversation service. Conversation service, and we'll go ahead and say this dot conversation service, conversation service is equal to conversation service. Looks good to me. Now let's go ahead and come down the bottom. I think in reality I had it above React message, so go ahead and say public, and this will return a list list of message. Again, we might want to convert this to a message GTO, I don't know, and say read messages. I'm going to cheat a little bit on this. Whenever we open up the modal inside of React, I'm just going to read all the messages. I'm not doing an observer and all that stuff because the observer is not very reliable. It's slow. I'm just going to go ahead and do a one and done. We're going to have an integer user ID. We're going to have an integer conversation ID. Like so. And I'm doing it this way because I was lazy. I'm just doing a GET request. Probably should have been a POST request. Probably should have passed everything, but it is what it is. We're going to have application user, and we're going to go ahead and say user is equal to user service dot find. I think it's find by ID. Let's get user by ID and then pass in that user ID. I think that I have error handling for this, but I don't remember. I'm assuming I do. That's why I probably used to get there. And we'll also go ahead and have a conversation. We'll call it conversation. So go to conversation service. And this one is called find by ID, and pass in that conversation ID. So now we should have the application user, should have the conversation to work with, and now we can go ahead and continue here. So now we're going to go ahead and do is we need to get the messages that we're reading the notifications for. So we're going to say list of message, and here we're going to say messages to read is equal to conversation. Get conversation message. We're going to go ahead and stream. And I think that I might have actually need to do like one more part of the filter here now that I think about it. But we're going to go and stream, and we're going to go ahead and say dot filter. And then here we're going to go ahead and filter message dot get sent by dot get dot get, and I can't type. Try this again. Get user ID not equal to, and then user ID. We're gonna go ahead and just pass back. I think this is proper, but it seems backwards. But we should be basically passing back all the ones that weren't the sent by user. And this might not be the right way to do this. We might have actually wanted it to be equal to our user ID now that I think about it, because we want it specifically for us. So I think this is a lot that we want. I'll test it and see if it works or not. We also probably want to check to see if it was already like read, because it's going to be getting back all the messages instead of only like the ones that haven't been read, basically. So I might need to refine this logic slightly, but for now we're just going to go ahead and say next.map, and then we're going to go ahead and say message like so. I guess it technically won't hurt anything. We're just doing extra work. It's a set application user like so, and then here we say seen by is equal to message dot get seen by. So we're gonna go ahead and get the current users that's been seen by, and then we need to go ahead and say dot add. We'll go ahead and add our user. We'll go ahead and say message dot set seen by, and then pass in seen by, and then finally we need to go ahead and just return the message, and then we'll go ahead and say whoops dot to list to go ahead and get that back as a list. So now we have our filtered messages. Now we want to go ahead and say notification service, and then dot acknowledge or read message notifications. We can pass back the messages to read. We can also pass back the user. Now the only thing is, once again, I forgot to save the message itself because we went through and we added the messages to read, we added the seen by. So what we need to also do, which I forgot, is return message repository dot save all. And we also need to go ahead and say messages to read. We need to go ahead and update those as well. If this works, I don't know, because I didn't set this up exactly this way. We also need to think about whether or not the messages have been read or not. So actually what I'm going to go ahead and do is hop back into the notification service really quick and just add that logic. So inside of a notification service, I'm going to do one more filter. We're going to go ahead and filter where it's RID. I'm also going to go ahead and filter where nodi, and we'll go ahead and say nodi dot get. We're going to go ahead and say is acknowledged. And I don't know if I can just say not. This isn't JavaScript, so I don't know if that's going to work. Okay, well, so we only want the ones that are from us or the person that we pass and they're not acknowledged. So now let's finally wrap this up by going to the message controller. Inside the message controller, let's go ahead and go above React, but below reply. Let's go ahead and say at get mapping. We'll go ahead and say that the value is equal to /read. We'll go ahead and say public list of message. Again, we might want to make this a message GTO. We'll see. Read messages, and this will go ahead and be at request param, and then we'll go ahead and have our user ID, which would be an integer user ID. We'll also have at request param, and this one will be conversation ID, and then integer conversation ID. And this one has many places where it could go wrong, so that's cool. Message service dot, and then read messages. Pass in the user ID, pass in the conversation ID, and this one has so many places it could go wrong. And then finally, before we actually wrap up and test this, let's go ahead and go into the conversation controller and create a handler for the conversation not bound exception. So I'll just go to the bottom here, go ahead and say at exception handler, go ahead and say conversation does not exist exception class, a public response entity of type string, handle conversation does not exist exception. And then here, once again, we'll go ahead and say return new response entity. This one, I think I was getting tired. I did this one a little bit different, but it's what it is. Go ahead and say conversation not found. It's going to go ahead and give us the same end result. HTTP status dot not underscore found. So now, fingers crossed, with all the stuff that I changed, it isn't broken. Let me make sure HTTP status came from the right place. I don't think it did. Let's go ahead and delete this. This should come from like somewhere else. Let's check the other options for this importing. We want it from Spring Framework. There we go. Cool. Let me go ahead and refresh the application one more time, and fingers crossed this all works. So back in Postman, let's go ahead and create a conversation. We need to make a couple messages here. So we'll go ahead and make one from Rick. We'll go ahead and make one for myself. So sent by user ID 5. And we'll go ahead and say message from Ethan. Okay. Go ahead and send that one. We'll go ahead and once again make one more user ID 5, and then we'll go ahead and say message from Rick 2. So this is that way we can go ahead and test to make sure that messages that I sent myself aren't going to be read by myself. So now we should have 3 messages. So now if we go ahead and so get/read, we can go ahead and say we want the user ID 5, which is me, in conversation 1, and we'll go ahead and read the messages that aren't read in there. Now fingers crossed I didn't mess up any of the filters and stuff. Let's go ahead and send. So we got message ID 3, which is sent by myself. So we did this wrong. Let me double check here. So I think this still needs to be the way I had it before. So let's go back to the message service. If we come back into read messages, so I had this as not, but then I'm like, maybe that's not correct. Psyching myself out. Let's go ahead and resave this. Let me go ahead and set up the data again. Okay, I went ahead and recreated all of our messages. Let's go ahead and try to read again and make sure it gets back the right data. There we go. So we got message 1 from Rick. Now it's been seen by myself. We have message 5 from Rick. It's been seen by myself. Everything looks good. If we send this again, fingers crossed it gives us nothing. Okay, so we need to look into this. It shouldn't have sent back data again because we should have been, well, actually no, it is going to send back data, I guess, because we have the red messages. So that's probably fine, but it shouldn't have been updated inside of the notification again. Let's just hop into dbeaver, make sure that the relative tables got updated, and we'll go ahead and wrap up this episode. So once again, let's go ahead and go into message. We should have 3 messages in here. Let's go ahead and refresh this. We have 3 messages. That's good. If we go into our, let's see this, messages seen by, we should see that user ID 1, although this doesn't seem quite right. I might need to double check what was going on here, because the data here is correct. Message 1 seen by me, and then message 5 seen by me. So I don't know what's going on here. I think I have these switched. So this should be user ID. So I need to swap this. So that's an easy fix, because this should be the user ID, this should be message ID. We can fix that really quickly. And then let's just make sure that the notifications got read. Go to notifications, these 2 acknowledged, which is what I expected. Cool. So let's hop into the code one more time. I need to swap the many to many tags here, and then that should be a wrap. So let's go back into message, and all this is, if we come down to our many to many, is for seen by. So join column should be message ID, it seems like, and then this one should be user ID, because they were swapped. There we go. That should be good to go. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Everything helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you guys do want to see we start from absolute scratch to get to where we are now, there will be a playlist linked here in a second inside the end video. But as always, guys, hope you did enjoy. This has been Ethan, or Uncoder. I'll see you all in the next video.